I had a neighbour, or several neighbours in fact, who would take their dog for a walk in the morning and let it poop outside someone else's front door. You know, the moral of the story being, I want my dog to poop, I can't be bothered to clear it up, I might as well let it poop outside someone else's door, because at least I'm sure I won't tread in it.
Earful Tower with Oliver G.
Okay, this week we're here with Stephen Clarke, who's written over a dozen books about France, Paris, and abroad. You probably know him most from A Year in the Merde. Welcome to the Earful Tower, Stephen.
Thank you.
First things first, how are we pronouncing merde when we're mixing it with English?
You should say merde.
So when you talk about it, you say a year in the merde.
In the merde, yeah, because I actually wrote a book called Dial M for Merde, and if you say Dial M for Merde, it almost sounds like the book that I've ripped the title off of, Dial M for Murder. So it's like Dial M for Merde, it's merde. You know, it's like I kind of pronounce it when I'm speaking English. I pronounce it, sort of anglicise the French pronunciation only slightly. So merde.
By that logic, does that mean you say, I'm just going to go down to the restaurant?
No, there's no logic at all.
No, right.
Who needs logic?
Let's talk. I've referred to you in previous episodes as the godfather of French bashing.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, no, the godfather of French bashing was probably King Edward I.
No, he's the king of god bashing.
Oh, is he? Ah, right, okay.
Why was he the king of... Why was he the...
Well, he was probably the first English king who spoke English as a native language, as his first language, rather than Norman French. And it's quite fantastic because the first thing he did as an English king speaking English was invade France.
Right.
So it's quite funny, really, that the first act of the English language, really, was to invade France. It's sad, but funny.
And this is something you've written about, obviously,
yeah.
But is he someone that you take inspiration from in your own role as a French basher?
No, I don't invade anywhere generally, and I never wear a sword.
Right, not yet.
No.
But let's talk a little bit about this French bashing. One of my main questions here is I want to learn, I want you to teach me how to get away with it.
Well, no, I don't actually do French bashing, I don't think.
Oh, I could quote from one of your several books we have on the table here to prove you otherwise.
I do no, but French bashing kind of implies a one-way scheme where you're just pounding away at your enemy without them getting back at you. For me, it's more like a game of tennis where I sort of say stuff about the French, but I also say stuff about the Brits, about everybody. Even though I make jokes about France, I'm much less of a French basher than the French are themselves. If you want to hear viciousness about France, listen to a French person.
How do you mean?
They moan non-stop about their own country. They're always telling you that everything's going wrong, everything's rubbish, nothing works. But I just sort of have sort of mild fun and make little jokes about the fact that that Parisians can't stand in a queue and things like that.
Right.
I have a little fun with history as well, pointing out rather painfully the times that the French have lost terrible defeats in history or been humiliated, even when sometimes, like with Napoleon, they claimed that he actually won Waterloo and things like that.
That's the title of one of your books.
Yeah, how the French won Waterloo, I think they did. That's not really French bashing, though, because that's kind of partial Napoleon bashing, which is not the same thing. Lots of French people hate Napoleon, really, really hate him, much more than anyone English ever has, I think. And also in my book, in How the French won Waterloo, I think they did, I actually point out that at the end, Napoleon did win a kind of victory, because if you go to Waterloo now, there are 10 Napoleon statuettes and postcards and whatnot, and there's like 1 of Wellington, 0 of Blucher. Napoleon has won the historic Battle of Waterloo. He is the hero of Waterloo. His is the picture you see everywhere. So he has won a kind of battle. So I wouldn't say it's French bashing, really. It's having fun with the French, but in a lot less violent way than the French do about themselves, and also giving them some kind of leeway for a partial victory.
Perhaps I was too strong with the term French bashing, but you can't deny that if you're playing a game of tennis, you're doing a lot of hard smashes.
Ah, yeah, when you get in a good smash and win the point. Sure, you do. But I mean, they can knock it back at you. I mean, the French make fun of us about all sorts of things, about our bad food. They say English food is rubbish, which is kind of untrue, but true as well, because personally now, when I go to London, if I go to a pub in London, I would never, ever eat anything cooked anymore. Nowadays, in the kitchen, all you'll have is a fryer, the machine of, a fryer, and probably some student with a microwave. Fish and chips these days is sort of nuclear batter that's been refried for the 20th time. I'd never eat that in a pub as I used to. So, good stuff like fish and chips is now being ruined. So, and the French make fun of our food all the time, and partially I would say yes, but at the same time, in London now, there's some of the best French restaurants in the world. So, there's some good food in London as well.
There was a bit of a French pronunciation on the word restaurant then.
Restaurant, was there?
Yeah.
Well, restaurant, yeah.
And, go on, sorry.
No, after you, James, go for it.
No, I want to ask, because your books have been published all over the world. Is it 20 countries?
Apparently it's 23.
23 countries. Okay, so what is it? Why are people in America, in Japan, why do they want to hear about an English person, but not bashing as we say, but talking about the French habits?
First of all, my books are really, really cheap. So, they do travel well. And they're light and they're waterproof as well. So, they're useful.
Good to know.
You can use them as sponges and everything.
You can use them to, as you say in your own book, you can use them for your neighbour's barbecue if they're...
You can, or you can sort of hit someone over the head with, 1,000 years of annoying the French is very thick, so, you can play tennis with it if you want. Anyway, but no, I think that the funny thing is I found, since I started writing the books, I didn't realise this before. In fact, everyone in the world has an opinion about France and the French. I mean, they also have an opinion about America, but most of their opinions about America will be very political and very for or against. With France, they have all these different attitudes. Like, lots of people think Paris is really, really romantic. So they're fascinated by Paris. If you go to, like, San Francisco and you tell someone, you tell people, oh, I live in Paris, they think, oh my God, that's just so glamorous and wonderful. And, well, and do you bump into Coco Chanel every week, and have you seen Ernest Hemingway recently? I mean, there's incredible romanticism about it. If you go to other places, like if you go to some places in England, they think, aha, French, bunch of garlic-eating idiots, and thank God we voted for Brexit. Another different attitude. But everywhere in the world has an attitude about the French. In Eastern Europe, lots of them, I found when I wrote my Waterloo book, lots of them love Napoleon because Napoleon actually liberated them from Russian or Prussian occupation. So in the Czech Republic, when I was traveling around the Czech Republic for one of my books, and while we were traveling around, they took me to this monument. It wasn't really a monument. In the middle of the Czech countryside is a cement factory, right, with these two enormous towers, and in the middle a sort of conveyor belt taking this rubble up to be crushed. And the owners of the factory have painted the towers and kind of prolonged this sort of conveyor belt thing. So it now looks like two giant Napoleonic artillerymen and a big cannon. They've turned this cement works into a homage to Napoleon,
wow,
who liberated their country. So everyone has an attitude about the French. So if you write books about France and you travel around the world, they're all saying to you, okay, tell us about the French. And, if you tell them the truth about what life is like in France, they're not always particularly happy about it because they romanticize, So if you tell them, people shove in front of you when you're trying to get a loaf of bread or whatever. Not that in my local boulangerie, the boulanger will never serve anyone if they try and push in.
Is that true?
Oh, yeah, they're brilliant.
What, have you seen it happen before?
Oh, yeah, people try and push in. No, monsieur. Yeah, good.
Can you tell us where this is?
Where it is the one. No, I found that in a good old traditional boulangerie, the women serving behind the counter are the best crowd control experts in France. They should send them all to work at every airport in the world, so that if you get on a plane and they say, right, we're now boarding rows 40 to 60, every French person with a ticket in row 1, 2, 3, and right at the beginning will plough forward to get on, even though if they're not in rows 40 to 60. And in most places in the world, except America, because they're really strict about these things, most places in the world, they'll let them get away with it. But in the boulangerie, you cannot get away with it.
I wonder why that is.
I don't know. It's just some sort of traditional thing where people have always queued up for bread. So the boulangers have, they're controlling this essential life force, which is bread, and you're not going to get it unless you behave yourself.
Maybe we could ask them to stand below the escalators in the metro as well. Yeah,
and Eiffel Tower. They could. You should send all these crowd control police. Maybe you should send them to work in a boulangerie for a year first, and then they'd go out there, and they would. There'd be no more riots at French demonstrations anymore. They would get them under control.
James brings up an interesting point about people metro etiquette. I wonder if you have one thing that you think is the worst habit of Parisian people.
on the metro.
And not just in general.
Oh, in general. It's getting a bit better, but my old phobia, which partially inspired the title of my first book, A Year in the Merde, was that I had a neighbour, or several neighbours in fact, who would take their dog for a walk in the morning and let it poop outside someone else's front door. You know, the moral of the story being, I haven't got much time, I want my dog to poop, I can't be bothered to clear it up, I might as well let it poop outside someone else's door, because at least I'm sure I won't tread in it, you know. That used to happen all the time. That's got a lot better now, except if you go to a pedestrian street where you still find huge mounds of dog poo.
So you mean a pedestrian, like a pedestrianised area, like in the second or something?
A pedestrianised street where there's no cars.
Right.
Because obviously if you're a dog owner, you want your dog to poop safely. You don't want to get run over, you know. So pedestrianised streets are best. That used to be their problem. Now I find it really annoying that they kind of, Parisian drivers kind of regard the red light as an option.
Right.
It's not an obligation. It's kind of, okay, there's a red light, but, you know, what does a red light know about life? You know, it hasn't studied at university or anything. It doesn't know what's going on in my life. It doesn't know I'm in a hurry. So, what, you know, who cares whether it's telling me to stop? It doesn't know I'm in a hurry, so I'm going to go through, you know, I'll ignore it.
Is this the motorists or pedestrians or both?
This is cars.
Right.
Well, pedestrians, I mean, you just dash across the road whenever you can, you know, and run for your life, because in lots of junctions, you know, you're never sure that someone's actually going to stop. But no, car drivers kind of regard, you know, they don't respect red lights. So there's this kind of, in Paris, there's this kind of attitude which is, I'm going where I'm going, I'm going to do what I'm going to do, so you might as well just live with it.
Right. Which
is quite hard to take when you first get here. But once you get into the mood, once you get into the swing of things, it's great, because, you know, when I travel now, I'm the sort of expert at pushing to the front of queues, because I'm a Parisian. I turn into a Parisian when I was taking the Eurostar the other day on my way to London. If you're going onto the carriages at the far end of the platform, you get on at this entrance there, and for some reason, all the British people queue up before the train's boarding. Right?
Do you mean the bit that you mean once you've gone through the control and you're about to go down the...
Yeah, once you're going to get onto the train.
Yep.
People queue up, whereas there's nothing that says queue up here, right? And so there's loads of people sitting around, and then it says, we're now ready for boarding, and there's a long queue. But of course, all the Parisians, they haven't been queuing up, so they just go straight and try and get on the train. Whereas these Brits, and you know, have been queuing up for 20 minutes, think, hey, they're pushing in. They're not actually pushing in, because no one says you have to queue. British people just genetically queue up, you know. And so I was doing this, and I was sort of like all the other Parisians. I didn't have any luggage either, so I wandered towards the train, and I heard this American voice behind me, this woman, and she was saying, and she actually literally said, "Hey, dude,
right.
You know, what's he doing? What's this guy doing?" Like that. And she was with this fella, an American fella. He said, "Oh no, just leave it. We're in Paris. They push in." And she said, "No," and she actually came and stood right in front of me.
Wow.
Like, defiance. So I didn't say anything, because I didn't want to spoil her dream of being pushed in front of by a Parisian. I didn't want to reveal that I'm English. So we then walked down this little corridor, and then when you go to get on the platform, you go down this long escalator, right? And it's a very wide gangway leading to the escalator. So as we arrived in this place, I sort of gave her a quick look, and then I did the most massive push-in I've ever done in my life. I sort of skipped around the crowd and went straight to the escalator. And as I went there, I could hear her going on about, "God, these Parisians pushing me." And I just thought it was so wonderful to have a chance to annoy someone like that.
What language would you have spoken to her in?
I would have spoken in French, because she's going to go back now to America, and she's going to say, "These damn Parisians, they're so impolite." Well, in a way, she's right, because I'm English, but I'm also... When it's convenient, I'm Parisian as well.
If you're just joining us, you're listening to the Earful Tower. We've got Stephen Clarke, author of, how many books is it now?
I'm not entirely sure. It depends how you count, but about sort of 14 or 15, I think.
14 or 15 books, mostly about France. And I want to ask you, if you've been in France for since the first book was 2004, so...
I've been here but I didn't start writing about France until I really knew the country, so I was here for 10 years before, so I've been here for over 20 years now.
All right, so can you tell me a little bit about the story? I mean, it's an old story now, but how you got that first book published? The idea, did you self-publish those first 200 copies?
I
or?
did, yeah. First of all, I wrote A Year in the Merde, and nobody wanted it. They were saying to me, "Oh no, we've already had A Year in Provence."
And that was that kind of the inspiration for the book, as in you wanted to...
It was a counter-inspiration in a way, because I opened the book A Year in Provence, and I saw that the year started in January. And my initial reaction, having lived in France for a while, was, hang on, that's wrong. A year doesn't start in January in France. It starts in September.
And that's where your book begins.
That's how my book begins, with almost those exact words. And also, that book was about the south of France. It's all sunny, smells of lavender and olive oil, and all the peasants are sort of quaint idiots.
Right.
And in my experience, France was the opposite. I mean, I was in Paris, so it wasn't always very sunny.
But his book was a runaway success, wasn't
A
it?
huge success.
Well, have you met the author?
No. But I mean, no. It's a really well done book, because it really he was in advertising. It's a really clever, well written, funny book about presenting the image of the south of France as a romantic place, which is a very clever thing to do. And I decided to turn that on its head and do the opposite, which is everyday life in a big French company in Paris. It's the total opposite, which is why I chose the title A Year in the Merde. I was looking for a title. What's the opposite of Provence?
Right.
Merde. A Year in the Merde. So anyway, I wrote this thing, and they were saying to me, no, we don't think, all publishers were saying, we don't think anyone would want this, this book. It's a bit vulgar. And also it's kind of too everyday life. It destroys the romanticism. So I got a friend to design a cover for me. And I got the book professionally printed by a proper printer, so it looked like a real book. But I cheated. I pretended that Paul West, the hero of the book, was actually a real person who was writing an expose about life in a big French company, and he couldn't tell us his real name, because otherwise he'd get beaten up by his boss and blah blah blah. Meanwhile, I was the publisher, so I cheated. And so I sort of self-published, but kind of cheated.
So that first book had Paul West as the author.
It was A Year in the Merde,
but it doesn't anymore now.
No, it doesn't anymore. No, because so I tried to sell it, and then again, not many people wanted it. But I was going around door to door to English language bookshops in Paris, of which there are a few. One of them took it, only one, and it was the Abbey bookshop in the centre of Paris, the Rue. I can't remember what it is now, but it's Rue de la Parcheminerie in the 5th arrondissement. Great little Canadian bookshop. He said, this looks really good, this book. Let's do a reading and everything. And can you get Paul to come along?
Right.
So I told him, Paul can't really come along. I'll do it. I'm a bit older than Paul, but I'll just say I lied about my age. So I actually did a reading pretending I was Paul West. And I got one review in the Parisian edition of the Metro newspaper. And as soon as that review came out, funnily enough, I mentioned my website name, luckily for me.
Which is StephenClarke.com?
Yeah, it wasn't then. It's StephenClarkeWriter.com, but it wasn't back then. It was something different. But anyway, StephenClarkeWriter.com, let's say. And from that morning, instead of getting like 3 adverts for Viagra, I suddenly started getting 100 emails from people wanting to buy the book, and it just took off.
As in French people wanting to read it in English?
French people mostly wanted to read it in English.
Wow.
English people living in France who'd heard about it. It was just a sort of... This was in 2004, so it was before Facebook, it was before Amazon, but it took off as a kind of internet success story. And suddenly, from having 200 books in my living room, I suddenly was selling like 1,000 a week, and I had to get them reprinted, and it was absolutely incredible.
How did it feel to go back to those bookshops that turned you down the first time?
The ones that turned me down, I just charged them more than I charged others. Yeah. I gave the Abbey bookshop cheap rate, and the other ones they had to pay a bit more.
Yeah.
But it was fantastic, because it's a dream come true, because here was this book that nobody wanted, and then suddenly I was dropping off like 20 copies at a big bookshop on a Saturday morning, and they would phone me back at lunchtime and say, "We sold them all, can we have some more?"
Wow.
And I was doing things like I'd be trolling along the streets of Paris with I had one of these shopping trolleys. It's like a rucksack on wheels, and in that I could fit 70 books.
Right.
And I remember once I was going along towards the metro with this there's 70 books that I had to drop off at a couple of bookshops, and I got a phone call from a really big national magazine in France wanting an interview. And I said to him, okay, I can only give you like 5 minutes because I'm on the way to the metro, you know. And so we talked about this, and then I said, well, sorry, I've got to go now. I've got to get the metro. Went down into the metro with my books to deliver them. I was thinking, hang on, what have you done? This bloke was offering you a national media interview, and you just cut him off because you have to go and deliver books. You know, it was becoming completely insane like that. And because I was hand delivering or putting into envelopes 1,000 books a week while working a full-time job. Right? So it just went completely mad. So in the end, I went to a literary agent and said, like, this is what's happening. And she said, oh, you know, great. I'll get the publishers onto it.
They saw Euro signs when you walked in with
the publishers, once it was working like that,
right.
Actually, no, my agent got me a spot on the BBC, a quick 2-minute interview, and on BBC, and and the publishers actually started ringing me, you know, saying, you know, is your book available? And we sold the book to the one of the publishers who'd heard me on the radio, and who said, and I'm still with the same publisher.
And then next thing, your second book is knocking Harry Potter off the bestseller list.
It did for a day.
That's not bad.
Yeah, when Merde Actually came out, it went to number 1 ahead of a Harry Potter book, but only for a week. Then I'm sure then Harry came back. He sort of magicked me out of the way again.
There can't be many books that would knock the Harry Potter book off the top spot, though.
No, but I know. It was absolutely unbelievable. I mean, by the time A Year in the Merde was taken up by a mainstream publisher, I was actually writing the sequel because I'd enjoyed writing the first one. I had lots more to say, and I thought, if it doesn't work, I'll just publish the second one. So I'd actually half finished it, so it came out quite quickly. It sort of rode on the wave of the first one.
We're running low on time, amazingly, already, but I thought we could do something we do with all the guests, is the quickfire round, where I put you on the spot. Are you ready for this?
Go on then.
So it's going to have a bit of a cultural theme. First things first, what's your favourite French movie?
What is it called? L'homme, le grand blanc à la chaussure noire. I always get it wrong. It's Pierre Richard. It's like a 1972 thriller about this violin player who's very funny, and he gets chosen at random as the victim of a spy scandal. He's not a real spy, but anyway, it's complicated, but it's really, really funny.
Okay. Favourite book about France?
Well, Year in the Merde, obviously.
Sorry, there's a bit after it that wasn't written by you.
Oh, I see. Favourite book about France, I would have to say, Regain by Jean Giono, which is a story of a little Provençal village, but a sort of real story about about a village that's sort of starving to death and has to be, you know, got back on its feet again.
Sounds morbid.
No, it's actually, Regain, the title is very up. It's sort of going down, and then sort of life force takes over.
Hang on, this is a quick fire round.
Sorry, yeah.
Favourite museum in Paris?
Favourite museum in Paris, the Carnavalet, the History of Paris Museum.
Right. And what about your favourite French word?
Favourite French word obviously would have to be merde.
Okay.
Because it's the most useful word in French.
Okay. Favourite cafe in Paris?
Well, it's my corner cafe near where I live.
You don't want to reveal. You don't want people to come in watching you writing, do you?
I don't go and write. I can't. No, I just go there for a cup of coffee and read the paper, and then I go and write.
What about favourite cafe that you tell us the name of?
Favourite cafe I can tell people the name of. I don't really know the names of cafes.
This is a secretive man. What about restaurant?
Favourite restaurant. God almighty. Again, my favourite restaurant is a tiny little self-service sushi place near Hôtel de Ville called Ryaki.
Okay.
So I hope they give me a cheap sushi. It's really good. You just nip in there. They know me, and I always have exactly the same thing. And it's one of the places where you can actually get a small portion of sushi. So if you're not incredibly hungry, you just go in there quickly, and anyway.
And
so it's not a French one, I'm afraid.
Last question is, tell me like a secret spot in Paris, something the tourists don't know, and why you think it's good.
A secret spot in Paris, it would have to be the Bassin de la Villette, which is near the most romantically named metro station in Paris, Stalingrad.
In the 19th, right?
In the 19th, which is a huge canal basin, which is sort of one of the most breezy, airy places in Paris, and it's also got lots of sort of trendy cafes and pubs around it now. When I live quite near there, and when I moved there 8 years ago, there was a crack dealer's village at the bottom of it. But now it's more sort of people playing pétanque and looking trendy.
And last question, tell us about your latest book.
My latest book.
And it's not quickfire anymore, you can take your time.
Okay, well, since you ask, thanks, Bill. Merde in Europe is what it says on the tin. It's about an English fella, Paul West, the hero of all my books, who goes to Brussels to try and find out what really happens there. And I wrote this in the lead up to the Brexit campaign because I was a bit worried about what I was reading in the British press, which was all this nonsense about Brussels, way beyond the whole thing about, they tell us what shape our bananas have to be, which is rubbish. There were all these fake stories about, I was reading the press, like I read one which said that Brussels wants to ban English barmaids' cleavages,
right?
Stuff like that. Brussels wants to force English lorry drivers to eat muesli. That was a real story. The EU wants to ban the kilt.
Wasn't this a lot of Boris Johnson's journalism?
This is stuff that's been in the British press and presented as serious interpretations of EU laws. And I realised what a certain sector of the British press is doing is they take a real EU law, like, for example, the law about noise in the workplace. Okay, there is a law about how many decibels you can have in your workplace before your boss has to give you earmuffs, right? Now, which is apparently it's about 110 decibels, which is about the same volume, weirdly enough, as a set of bagpipes. Right? So in the British press, the story was EU wants to ban bagpipes,
right?
Which is rubbish. All it's saying is that if you have bagpipes in your workplace, I don't know how many people do, but if you do have bagpipes in your workplace, your boss has to offer you headphones to protect you. Now, and they were doing that. So anyway, I sent Paul West there to find out what really goes on. And there's a kind of little sort of intrigue there as well. He goes to work for this French MEP who says she wants to save the EU and keep Britain in the EU, but he's not sure. She's a corrupt French politician. This was before any of this Fillon stuff, but she's, she was a French corrupt politician. And so he goes there, and he has a whale of a time, which people actually in Brussels do. I found all these Brussels bureaucrats are paid a hell of a lot of money, and they spend it all on smart clothes and boozing and partying. But they actually, I found, do some pretty good stuff. So anyway, so my book is it's a sort of comedy about what really goes on in Brussels, which is actually quite funny when you go there, in the corridors behind the scenes at the European Parliament. But it leads up to the referendum. And I brought it out last year, just before the referendum, and now, this month, I'm bringing out a new edition, which has a post-Brexit chapter, which has Paul West panicking because they've had Brexit, so now he's thinking, as a Brit living in France, what can I do? Should I become French? Can I become French? Can I sing the Marseillaise? Morally, can I sing it? This song about, which has got a line in it about, let impure blood water our fields. Isn't that a bit racist? Can he sing it? Can he sing the Marseillaise? Can he even pronounce the word Marseillaise? Paul West can't pronounce the word Marseillaise, So he's thinking, I can't be French. But anyway, so he's got this new dilemma about what can I do about Brexit. So it's just a sort of Brexit novel where I'm trying to inject a bit of humour.
And the one with the new chapters coming out this month?
It's coming out this month. It's still called Merde in Europe, but it's in a new edition with on the front cover it says with new chapters and everything. I've added sort of 2 or 3 new chapters.
Any ideas of ever making a film out of all these?
I have lots of ideas about making a film. The only trouble is, if you want to make a film, a sort of decent film, even with your iPhone, you have to pay the actors, so it costs you a bit of money, So there's a producer who has written a script, and they're apparently now, the last I heard from them, they're pumping in a bit of sort of post-Brexit stuff. They asked me for some kind of Brexit-related jokes, so I sent them my book.
Send them the British newspapers.
With any luck, there will be a film, but I don't hold my breath because the film industry is, it's a world of its own. You can't control it. You just have to. You can't say, oh my God, this producer's making a film of my book. I'm going to buy my yacht and rent a helicopter or whatever. You can't do that. You just have to get on with life.
All right, I think we're out of time now. You've been listening to
Okay.
Stephen Clarke. Thanks for coming in, Stephen.
Merci.
This is the Earful Tower. Find us on Facebook, World Radio Paris, also on Facebook, and join us next week for another guest. And don't forget to get Stephen Clarke's book, Merde in Europe.
Earful Tower with Oliver G.